All right, guys, the last video here for section 7.1, we're going to find some information from a polynomial graph, okay? And as you can see, there are three graphs shown here. We're going to go through graph A together in terms of the characteristics and information that we should be able to gain from taking a look at a polynomial function. We'll talk about end behavior like we did in the previous video. We'll talk about X-intercepts and Y-intercepts. These are concepts that we have talked about and referred back to in a number of units and sections already, basically anytime we were asked to graph or look at a graph. Okay? And we will also mix in the terminology of turning points, and we'll kind of show you where those are at on a graph. Okay? So if we take a look here at graph A, this is the graph of a polynomial function. Okay? And we'll talk about the first things we know. Remember, we're going to talk about two different things here. So we're going to talk about kind of what's happening in the middle of the graph. What's happening in the middle of the graph? That would be the number of turning points. That would be the x-intercepts. That would be the y-intercepts. And then we're going to talk about also what's happening at the ends of our graph. Okay? And that's going to be just like the notes video that we talked about before. That's going to be our end behavior. Okay, so let's figure out what's going on in the middle of the graph, and we're going to utilize some different colors here. Let's talk first, and we'll go just right down the order of our table. The first thing they're asked is for the number of turning points. Okay, that's where the graph goes from going down to going up, or going up to going down. Okay, once you get into a little higher level math, we'll talk about decreasing to increasing, to decreasing to increasing. Okay. And where those change, that's what we call turning points, okay? So, right here, down at the bottom where this goes from going down to going up, that's going to be one of our turning points. And then up here, where it goes from going up to going down, it's turning. When we go down here, from going down to going up, that's also another turning point. How many turning points in this graph? There happen to be 3 turning points. Okay. Now let's take a look at our x-intercepts here. Okay, so our x-intercepts, we've got 1 crossing the x-axis, 2, we have a third, and actually we happen to have 4 x-intercepts here, crossing of where this graph crosses the x-axis. Okay, we're going to list them all. So there are a total of 4. And the x-intercepts happen to be at -1, 0, 0, 0, 2, 0, and 3, 0. Okay. These are things we've been doing for a lot of units now, and we should be pretty much experts at picking out our x-intercepts and at least listing them. Okay, so these are x-intercepts. Okay. This point here, the 0, 0 x-intercept, that also happens to be our y-intercept as well. That's where the graph is crossing the y-axis. It's not always at 0, 0 or always the same as an x-intercept. It just happens to be here. There will always be one y-intercept in a polynomial function. Okay. All right. So these 3 pieces of information or what's happening in the middle of our polynomial graph. Okay? Now we get to talk about our end behavior, okay? Just like we did on the previous video. If we look up here, what's happening at the ends? Well, let's take a look at what's happening on the left side of our graph. On the left side of our graph, it's ending upwards. On the right side of our graph, it is also ending upwards. So let's depict that visually down here in our end behavior visually. Okay, so on the left side of our graph, we said that it was ending up. On the right side of our graph, we also said that it was going up. Okay? Verbally, we could do that as well if we really wanted to. We could say that the left side goes up, and we could say that the right side goes up. And that's actually different than what we saw in our previous example. In our previous example, the left side went down and the right side went up. As you can imagine, there's really 4 different options. We could go up and up, down and up, down and down, or up and down. And those are things that you're going to see here in both graphs B and C as we get a little further into graphing our polynomials. For the end behavior, same thing here. Okay, as x is going to negative infinity, that means as x is going to the left, and this is the blue portion of our graph here, y is going to be going to positive infinity, because positive infinity means it's going up. As x is going to infinity, that would mean x is going to the right. Well, the right side of our graph is going up, as you can see here, which means y is going to infinity, also up. Okay. So hopefully we have an idea of how to take a polynomial graph and pick out some characteristics and information that are important. What pieces of information were important? Well, the middle of the graph, including our turning points, our x-intercepts, and our y-intercepts. And later down the road, we'll make a connection between like how many x-intercepts there are and how many turning points there are. And then the ends of our graph. Okay. The ends of our graph being what's happening on the left side and the right side of our graph. As it goes off to infinity or negative infinity or all the way left, all the way right. Is it going up or is it going down? And we listed those things down here in our bottom two rows. Okay? This is the visual, this is the verbal, this is the algebraic representation of those. What we'd like you to do now, after feeling comfortable with this, feel free to ask teachers if you have any questions about how we filled in that first column. But your goal is to complete the columns for both graphs B and C, and then just make sure you get them checked by your teacher before moving on to the online practice.